Chaturmukha hoy Krishna Sevanmukha Brahma hoite Naradiramati. Yeah. Narada hoite Vyas Madhva kohi Vyasadas Purna pragya padmanabha gati. Nrihari madhva vamshe akyokpya paramahamse shishya boli angikara kori. Akyopye shishya jai tirtanami parichai dhardasya jnana sindhu thori. Taha hoite dayanidhi tardash vidyanidhi Rajendra oilo taha hoite. Tahar kinko jai dharma nami parichai parampara jano bhalo mati. Jaya dharma dasya khyati Shri Purushottama jati Taha hoite brahmanya tirtha shori. Vyasa tirtha taradash Lakmipati Vyasa dash Taha hoite Madhavendra puri. Madhavendra puri bara shishya bara shishvar Nityananda Shri Adaita Vibhu. Ishvara Puri ki dhanya Koilin Shri Chaitanya Jagat Guru Gaura Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu Shri Chaitanya Radha Krishna nahi anya Rupanuga Janir Jivana. Vishwambhar Priyankar Shri Swarup Damodar Shri Goswami Rupa Sanatana. Rupa Priya Mahajan Jiva Raghunatahan Tar Priya Kabi Krishna Dasa. Krishna Dasa Priya Bharo Narotam Seva Para Jarapada Vishwanatha Asha. Vishwanatha Bhakta Sata Baladeva Jagannatha Tar Priya Shri Bhakti Vinoda. Mahabhagavata Bara Shri Gaura Kishora Bara Hari Bhajan Niti Jara Moda Shivarsha Bhana Vibara Shadasheba Sheba Para Tahardaita Dashanam Tabradhan Pracharato Shri Bhakti Vedanta Namo Patita Janiti Doyadham Patita Janiti Doyadham Jai Om Vishnu Pad Brahmahamsa Parivajagacharya Ashtotter Shatra Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the Assembled Devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Assembled Devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Assembled Devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Can somebody else connect now? Because I need to look at notes. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today's the disappearance day of Srila Ishwar Puri, but first we can go through the Bhagavatam and then means the verse and translation, and then I can speak about Ishwar Puri. Vidura Uvacha Sanchina Samshayah Mahyam Tava Sukta Asina Vibho Ubhayatra Api Bhagavan Manaha Me Sampradhavati Viduro Vacha Sanchina Samshayo Mahyam Tava Sukta Sina Vibho Ubhayatrapi Bhagavan Manome Sampradhavati Viduro Vacha Sanchina Samshayo Mahyam Tava Sukta Sina Vibho Ubhayatrapi Bhagavan Manome Sampradhavati Viduro Vacha Sanchina Samshayo Mahyam Tava Sukta Sina Vibho Ubhayatrapi Bhagavan Manome Sampradhavati. Please just chant. Mataji's. Vidura Uvacha. Vidura said, Sanchinaha cut off, Samshayaha doubts, Mahyam unto me, Tava your, Sukta Asina by the weapon of convincing words. Vibho, O my Lord, Ubhayatra api, both in God and in the living entity. Bhagavan, O powerful one. Manaha, mind. Me, my. Sampradhavati, perfectly entering. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Vidura said, O powerful sage, my Lord, all my doubts about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities have now been removed by your convincing words. My mind is now perfectly entering into them. The science of Krishna, or the science of God and the living entities, is so subtle that even a personality like Vidura has to consult persons like sage Maitreya. Doubts about the eternal relationship of the Lord and the living entity are created by mental speculators in different ways. But the conclusive fact is that the relationship of God and the living entity is one of the predominator and the predominated. The Lord is the eternal predominator, and the living entities are eternally predominated. Real knowledge of this relationship entails reviving the lost consciousness to this standard, and the process for such revival is devotional service to the Lord. By clearly understanding from authorities like Sage Maitreya, one can become situated in real knowledge, and the disturbed mind can thus be fixed on the progressive path. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutali Swayamurpat Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taparakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamshta Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Jijivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamshcha Hey Krishna Kurnasindu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhi Vrindavaneshwari Vrishapanu Sute Devi Pranama Mahire Pri Vansha Kapatu Vyasha Kripasandu Bhivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Psharne Nirvishesha Shunivari Paschatya Dishtatarne Buddha Mahadvire Mafpura Vibor Nirmaya Shadiyad Amushi Purusha Bhunti Gunan Shudashatmaka Surangashishta Bhagavan Shamsime. 1 second. Okay, so today is the disappearance day of Srila Ishvara Puri. He's the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya. So Prabhupada in this verse, he writes that, in his purport rather, the science of God is so subtle that even a personality like Vidura has to consult persons like Sage Maitreya. So Vidura was already learned. He already was in knowledge of the personality of Godhead because he's Yamaraj. He's Mahajana Yamaraj. So he didn't necessarily have to approach. He was situated in knowledge, but to give an example for others, specifically also to learn about the Krishna's Leela out of Vrindavan, he specifically approached because of that. That's one consideration. But he doesn't need to know these topics about the personality of God, how the Lord creates, etc. Presumably he already knows this. But to set an example, he's inquiring about these things. So similarly too, Lord Chaitanya, he approached and he accepted Srila Ishvara Puri as a spiritual master, just to set that example. Although Lord Chaitanya is God, he nevertheless accepted the spiritual master to set that example. And here, Srila Prabhupada, he writes that, that the living entity is the the Lord is the predominator, and the living entity is the predominated, eternally so, and the relationship is a fact and is eternal. But we see that seemingly Lord Chaitanya, because the spiritual master is always in one sense the superior, the predominator, and the disciple is the predominated, the spiritual master orders the disciple, not the other way around. Seemingly the roles are reversed. So, even though constitutionally it may be like that, for the sake of lila or for the sake of interacting with the devotees, sometimes it's switched around. So, but of course the relationship is there. Means Chaitanya is eternally God and Ishvara Puri is eternally a living entity. So I'll just speak a little bit on Srila Ishvara Puri. You can go to Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya Lila, Antya 8, chapter 8, text 29. And I'll just read the English. These don't really have purports. Well, some have purports, but I'll just read the English. This is just background. So Ishvara Puri, he was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri. Madhavendra Puri had presumably many disciples. I know specifically two we're hearing about in this past time. Near the end of his life, Madhavendra Puri, obviously he received the seed of ecstatic love for Krishna. Within the Sampradaya, he's credited for that. And he propagated that. He came before Lord Chaitanya, as we just sung in the song. And then his disciple, he had many disciples, two of which were Ramachandra Puri, and another was Ishvara Puri. He had presumably others as well, but we hear about these two disciples here. Ramachandra Puri, Ishvara Puri was first. Ishvara Puri, or Ramachandra Puri, I'll begin with that. So at the end of Madhavendra Puri's life, he was, you could say, in a state of ecstasy, something like that, and he was speaking of expressing separation for Krishna. And Ramachandra Puri, because of his atheistic mentality, he didn't fully understand the words of his spiritual master, and he tried to advise his spiritual master something along the lines of, at this stage of your life, you should be thinking about how to attain liberation to Brahman, you should be focusing your mind, or something like this. He spoke some impersonal philosophy to his spiritual master, thinking that his spiritual master was delusional or something like this, mistaken, unlearned, that he knew better than his spiritual master. And as a result of that, Madhavendra Puri became very upset with him. And then consequently, because of that offense to Madhavendra Puri, Ramachandra Puri, we don't hear, well, there are presumably reactions. He didn't necessarily, one thing that's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's material desires increased because of that offense to his guru. Just the opposite example is given in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Ishvara Puri, who was also there with Madhavendra Puri as he was in his final days. He was incapacitated Madhavendra Puri. So Ishvara Puri, he would, anyway, I'll just read the verses here. Ishvara Puri was always chanting the holy name and pastimes of Lord Krishna for Madhavendra Puri to hear. In this way, he helped Madhavendra Puri remember the holy name and pastimes of Lord Krishna at the time of death. Next verse. He would also perform menial services like cleaning up the stool and urine of Madhavendra Puri. Pleased with Ishvara Puri, Madhavendra Puri embraced him and gave him the benediction that he would be a great devotee and lover of Krishna. Thus, Ishvara Puri became like an ocean of ecstatic love for Krishna, whereas Ramachandra Puri became a dry speculator and a critic of everyone else, even of Lord Chaitanya. Ishvara Puri received the blessings of Madhavendra Puri, whereas Ramachandra Puri received a rebuke from him. Therefore, these two persons, Ishvara Puri and Ramachandra Puri, are examples of the objects of a great personality's benediction and punishment. Madhavendra Puri instructed the entire world by presenting these two examples. Then it speaks just more about Madhavendra Puri after this. But the central point is that among all the disciples of Madhavendra Puri, specifically Ishvara Puri received his favor, specifically at the end. And it's through Ishvara Puri that the seed of love of God was carried through, ultimately culminating in Lord Chaitanya. So Ishvara Puri, he was from a Brahminical background. He was a Vaishnava sannyasi. I don't know the details of his birth. Today's his disappearance day. There's not so much on his actual disappearance, actually. It's not really so much mentioned. I'll just get to that when I get to that, but just some details of his life. He was a traveling mendicant. It was a sannyasi who was traveling around. Sannyas taken obviously in the line of Madhavendra Puri, Madhva Sampradaya, obviously. He once visited Navadvip. Lord Chaitanya had already appeared at this time, and Lord Chaitanya was a boy. Nimai Pandit studying grammar in Navadvip, and Nimai was exhibiting his scholarly pastimes, discussing things like grammar and whatnot. So Ishwar Puri, he visited Navadvip, and Advaita Acharya could immediately recognize him. He was sort of he was a mendicant, so his dress was very like ragged, and he kept himself hidden, as described in Chaitanya Bhagavat. But Advaita Acharya, being obviously God himself, and also playing the role of a devotee in general, specifically advanced devotee, he could understand that this is a great personality. It's not like an ordinary Vaishnava, or just some ordinary person. What to speak of a ordinary Vaishnava? He's a very elevated Vaishnava. He's a very elevated devotee. And he asked him, "Who are you?" He could detect that his character was unusual. And so Ishwara Puri replied that, "I am a low-class Shudra." Advaita Acharya, he didn't buy into that. And so he had Mukunda Datta sing very sweetly. He's known for a sweet voice. Mukunda Datta sang a very sweet kirtan. And Ishwara Puri, hearing this kirtan, he immediately fainted into ecstasy and fell onto the ground. As described, he wet the whole ground with his tears. So he was exposed, in other words, as being an elevated Vaishnava. Advaita Acharya exposed him. So there's a few different pastimes with him in Navadvip. I'll talk about one maybe a little bit later when I speak about the Bhagavatam verse more. But he met Nimai Pandit, and him met together. He appreciated the learning of Nimai Pandit. He remarked that it was astounding that such a boy was so learned, and topics of grammar, etc., at such a young age. So he was very impressed by that. Later, then he left Navadvip after some time, and later, and then it also made an impression upon Nimai Pandit to some degree that this is a saintly personality. Later, after Ishwar Puri left Navadvip, Lord Chaitanya, the Nimai, he went to Gaya on pilgrimage, more or less, because he went to offer Pinda to his father, I believe. So there he met again Srila Ishwara Puri at, I forget the temple, I think it's like Bindu Madhava temple, something like that there. So he met Ishwara Puri there, and there Nimai's ecstatic feelings of love of God awakened, specifically when he met Madhavendra Puri. And it's Ishwara Puri, sorry. And it's described that they both went into an ecstatic state, Ishwara and Lord Chaitanya, and were exhibiting ecstatic symptoms at that time. Later, a few days after that, still in Gaya, Nimai requested Ishwara Puri for initiation. And it could be questioned. One thing I wanted to bring up, that the Lord is predominated, the predominator and living entity predominated. How is it that being a devotee, how is it that, and Ishwara Puri could understand when Nimai came to Gaya and he exhibited ecstatic symptoms, he could understand that this is the personality of Godhead. Ishwara Puri knew that it was Lord Chaitanya was God, Nimai was God. Still, nevertheless, he agreed to initiate him. So why would a devotee accept knowingly? It's one thing if, for example, Mother Yashoda, who's ignorant of Krishna's position more or less to some degree, and she just views Krishna as his son, but Srila Ishwara Puri had complete knowledge that Lord Chaitanya is God. Still, nevertheless, he accepted a position of seemingly superiority to Lord Chaitanya, and he initiated Lord Chaitanya. So one thing is that, when Nimai requested initiation into Diksha from Ishwara Puri replied that, yes, I'm willing to give you anything, even my very life, what to speak of mantras. So if a devotee is ready to offer his life to Krishna's service, what to speak of offering just some initiation mantras to Krishna's service? So that's what Ishwara Puri did. Later, so there, Nimai received initiation, and his whole he's God, obviously, but his whole mood then changed from there on. He returned to Navadvip. On the way, whereas previously he was exhibiting pastimes of being a scholar, principally in grammar, and debating on that purpose. When he came back after having met and received initiation specifically, his whole mood shifted towards one of being absorbed in Krishna consciousness, absorbed in expressing love for Krishna. So on the way back from Gaya to Navadvip, he stopped. He came at the birthplace of Ishwarpuri, and he collected some dust from the earth there. And it's described that he was so pleased upon seeing that place, he went into ecstasy. So he collected some dust from the birthplace of his spiritual master, and he kept it and returned to Navadvip. After that, they didn't meet. That meeting and initiation at Gaya, that was the last time Nima, Lord Chaitanya, saw his spiritual master. They didn't meet again. Ishwarpur was still alive, but he was traveling. He was a traveling mendicant. They didn't meet. But he knew that Lord Chaitanya had, when Lord Chaitanya went to Jagannath Puri, Ishwarpuri knew of this, and so he sent two servants, Kashishvara and Govinda, to serve Lord Chaitanya there. This is narrated in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And initially, Lord Chaitanya didn't want to accept service from his godbrothers. He considered it inappropriate, but then he understood that his spiritual master had ordered his godbrothers to go there to serve him. Then he accepted their service like that. So it's not described, at least in my knowledge of the books, what I could find. It's not after this meeting in Gaya and after this sending of these two disciples, there's not much information about Ishwarpuri as to his later pastimes or how he even disappeared. Of course, we have knowledge of his disappearance date. Otherwise, sometimes we don't, just like we have knowledge of... Anyway, some Acharya dates are like that. Sometimes we know disappearance, or sometimes we don't know the appearance, or vice versa. What is that? Yeah, I think Rupa Goswami is the same thing. I think we have disappearance, but we don't have the appearance date. So sometimes it's like that. So anyway, I couldn't find any more detailed information regarding Ishwarpuri, regarding after this meeting at Gaya. But he's a very important personality in our Sampradaya because he's the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya himself, of God himself. And he carried forth the seed of devotional service. He's within our parampara. So, speaking from the Bhagavatam here, there's one word that comes here. You can come back to Canto 3, Chapter 7, text number 15 now. Yeah, so there's a very nice verse actually. Sanchinas samshayo mahyam tava sukta sinavipo. Literally, he cut, from the word for word, he cut off, so the sage Maitreya, he cut off the doubts of Vidura's mind by his sukta asina, by the weapon of his words. We were just hearing Mahotsa Prabhu was quoting that the sadhu, saintly persons, they cut off the mind's attachments by their sharp words. So similarly, the same thing is going on here. Attachments, also specifically here, samshayaha, doubts. Just as Krishna, by his words, eliminated the doubts of Arjuna in the Gita, so similarly too, Maitreya, being the representative of Krishna, is doing the same thing to Vidura. He's cutting off the doubts of his mind, specifically by his sukta asina, the weapons of his convincing words. This word sukta is interesting. Somebody explained this to me, that just like we have sukta, there's prayers, sometimes there's like Purusha sukta, Narayana sukta, etc. like that. We have etc. Things in the Vedas are turned like this. Sometimes prayers in the Bhagavatam are also called like that. So, this word sukta, it literally means su ukta. Su means like good, and ukta means like said. So it literally means something like it's well spoken, well put together, or like beautifully spoken, something like this. So by his well spoken words, Maitreya cut off the attachment of Vidura's doubts, or not attachment, his attachments and his doubts. So he wasn't necessarily prepared to speak. Maitreya, we don't hear of him having any other disciples necessarily, at least in this Purana, and whatever I could find online. He was a rishi, but he not necessarily, and presumably he instructed people, but Vidura sort of approached him, and he wasn't necessarily, it's not like he prepared a big speech to deliver to Vidura or something like that. He just started speaking, and he wasn't skilled in any sort of rhetoric or anything like this. We hear here, the science of Krishna, or the science of God is so subtle that even a personality like Vidura has to consult persons like Sage Maitreya. So he's asking him very difficult questions that bewildered even Vidura, and they're of a very subtle nature. So just like sometimes we're asked questions by just people coming to the temple or new people, etc., like that, and we're bewildered sometimes how to answer properly. We may know the answer, but sometimes it's difficult to answer, or even difficult to phrase. So, but nevertheless, Maitreya, he had no such difficulty. He was able to clearly respond with sober thought, as we heard in previous verses. How is he able to speak nicely and cut off the doubts of his disciple? Not necessarily because he had any sort of material qualification, not because he was a Brahmana, not because he was learning the Shastra, but specifically because he was empowered by Krishna to do so. He was given, his words were empowered by Krishna, and because his words were empowered by Krishna, he could then cut off the doubts present within Vidura's mind. Otherwise, it's impossible to do so. One may be a very nice speaker, but without Krishna's mercy or Krishna consciousness in general specifically, you can't cut off the doubts of people's minds. There's so many motivational speakers who are very materially charismatic, but they can't really help anybody. They may speak very pleasing words, and in that way their speech may be considered sukta in that way, but actually is not pleasing at all. It's a completely horrible speech because it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't bring about real benefit. A motivational speaker can inspire somebody for the moment, but it doesn't bring them ultimate welfare. It doesn't deliver them from birth, death, disease, old age, etc. like this. And more so, actually, even from the philosophical point of view, even those who are good in rhetoric, just like you see classically people are now, is that I guess that profession is kind of gone now, but classically, traditionally, even up until recently, you have people who are trained in rhetoric and speaking from the birth. Greek philosophers were mainly like this. You had people in the Roman Empire like this. Even in the medieval ages, it was still like this. Now, it seems mainly those people who are trained in rhetoric are more or less just politicians, which is mainly what they do. They just spew rhetoric in parliaments and things like this. But even those who are trained philosophically and trained in speech, just by dry logic, dry philosophy, and dry speaking alone is not enough. In other words, one may be very trained, a very pleasing speaker, but the ultimate essence of it is being able to deliver Krishna to the dependent. Otherwise, it's all useless. A politician can deliver so many speeches. There's so many different famous speeches in history, just like we're in Atlanta. We have this, Martin Luther King is very popular here, or was, I don't know. People seem to be forgetting him mainly. There's streets dedicated to him, and they still have his house here. He's famous for a few different speeches, namely, I Have a Dream speech, but it's useless because that dream has come and has gone, and in one sense, it never came to be true. Still discrepancies are going on. So much agitation was created, and what was the result? Really, something was done, but ultimately he was killed for what he was trying to do. Still there's discrepancy, even though the government still there's discrimination going on. Even though the government has legislated things, it didn't really resolve the situation. It just shifted from one undesirable situation to another. So there's so many different famous speeches in history. What is that? That 7 years ago by Abraham Lincoln. People understand this, but what's the use of it? It's very nicely put together. So similarly, too, you see recent leaders, they have professional speech rights, often standing presidents, at least of the United States. They don't write their speeches. Other people write their speeches for them. And some speeches are very memorable. They have many good lines. They're very well put together. They're very inspiring. But ultimately, because they don't deliver Krishna, they can't cut off the doubts of the mind. And the people are dissatisfied. Therefore, politicians, they give big speeches, they take office, and then when they're in office, people are dissatisfied by their actives because they don't give Krishna. They can't set up a perfect state without Krishna being in the center. So the real thing is having one's speech being Krishna conscious, obviously, and Krishna being present within one's speech. Just as I mentioned before, Shukadeva Goswami, he prays that Krishna enters into his speech. When speaking in the Bhagavatam, we have this verse in the second canto, I quote, Bhunkti gunan shodasha shodashatmaka solankushishta bhagavan vachamsi me. May you please decorate, alankar, this word comes, may you please decorate my speech. Shukadeva Goswami prays like this. So similarly, Srila Prabhupada, Forgive me, I'm bad at Bengali, but he says, Akila Jagat Guru Bachana Sheyamar, Alankrita Koribar, Katamata Tumar. The same word, Alankrita. Tabakripa Hoile Mor, Kata Shudahabi. The translation of these verses is as follows: O spiritual master of the worlds, I can simply repeat your message. So if you like, you can make my power of speaking suitable for their understanding. Only by your causeless mercy will my words become pure. So Srila Prabhupada, he prayed in the same manner as Shukadev Goswami, looking forward to Krishna's mercy. Because we can take, even for a devotee, we can take so many classes on even how to deliver, and there's a science to it. There are sciences on how to speak better. Just like, for example, I was reading in one book, this is mundane, but just like you see sports commentators, those if you watch sports games, they have, for example, commentators on it. Two men just talking about what is already apparently going on just to make the thing exciting. And they're professionally trained to do so. For example, they say the word the, they say the and not the. Because if you say the, it sounds like you're saying and it sounds like you're stuffed up in speech. So you'll notice they'll always say the. The football player is going like this. So everything is coming clear. And so the word doesn't break their speech. This is just an example. I'm just saying there's a science to how you speak. There's a science to how you deliver speeches. Srila Prabhupada wasn't trained in that. But you see, he's amongst some of the greatest, practically some of the greatest speakers in not just religious history in the world. He's a very charismatic person. He wasn't necessarily trained in any sort of public speaking classes, anything like this. He was just empowered by Krishna. He prayed to Krishna, we have it here, I just quoted. He prayed to Krishna that Krishna may enter into his words, and Krishna did so. But simultaneously, he gave the writer that, if you so like, he qualified it that you may enter into my words, you may not enter into my words. I'll try anyway. The speech may be pleasing, it may not be pleasing. It may be convincing, it may not be convincing. Anyway, I'll try, and I'll look to Krishna's mercy. So similarly to Shukadev Goswami, so all areas of devotional service is like this. We can perform our service, and we pray to Krishna for empowerment to do so. One thing I wanted to read, do you have the Veda-based app? Or maybe I could pull it up, because I already have it. It's just on iPad, it's sometimes difficult. Okay, is that legible? I can increase it a little more. So this is regarding Ishwara Puri and Lord Chaitanya. This is a pastime out of Navadvip, when Srila Ishwara Puri first came to Navadvip and met Lord Chaitanya. So Ishwara Puri was very impressed that Lord Chaitanya, he was a great scholar of grammar, even at such a young age. I think he was younger than 10 years old. He was very young at this time, but still he was able to defeat even the Digvijay Pandit, who's quoted as Keshav Kashmiri sometimes. He was skilled in rhetoric, he was skilled in poetry, but still this young boy, Nimai, was able to defeat him. So Ishwara Puri was very impressed by the learning of this young boy, and Ishwara Puri was writing a book. I think it was called Sri Krishna Lilamrita, or something like that. So anyways, we have here, I'll just go through the English. Ishwara Puri, he wanted Nimai to review his book, go through his book and point out any errors. So, so Ishwara Puri was happy to see Nimai, and though he did not know him as the Supreme Lord, still he had love for him. This is out of the Chaitanya Bhagavat, which is where most of the information about Ishwara Puri comes from. Ishwara Puri smiled and said, "You are a big scholar. I've written a book about the characteristics of Lord Krishna. I would be most satisfied if you would tell me if there is any fault in it." The Lord replied, "Whoever finds fault in a devotee's description of Lord Krishna is a sinful person. Krishna is certainly pleased with his devotee's poetry, even though it's imperfectly composed." We have, for example, famously, this imperfectly composed, this Tadvag Visargo Janataka Viplavo, this word Abhadavati, imperfectly composed literature, Srila Prabhupada translates as. So this verse is there. Anyway, I'll speak on that a little bit more, but this verse is also there in the Bhagavatam. Just continuing. An uneducated person may chant Vishnaya, while a sober person will have to chant the proper form Vishnave. But the Supreme Lord Krishna will accept both forms when they are chanted with devotion. This is a technical point, just like we put on we chant these mantras for tilak, so most of them end in like Krishnaya, Vasudevaya. So the names end in A, but Vishnu ends in a U. So the form is different. So somebody who's uneducated in Sanskrit, which practically everybody is nowadays, they may chant Vishnaya. But even though the proper form is Vishnavi. But to Krishna, it doesn't matter. He takes both as equal. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he explains, in his purport to this, the Lord Krishna, a pundit, expert in correct language, and somebody ignorant of correct language are both equal. Of the two, Krishna bestows more mercy on the one who has more enthusiasm for the service of Krishna. So somebody may be very materially expert in a field, but the one who has enthusiasm for serving Krishna, he receives the favor of Krishna, not the one who's materially qualified. Krishna, the omniscient super soul of every living entity, is not guilty of the fault of partiality. So-called learned persons who are devoid of devotion proudly consider themselves learned as they reveal their foolishness by pointing out the faults in the transcendental language of the pure devotees. The Supreme Lord and the Master of Sarasvati, who is the goddess of different things, principally speech, we're taking it here, learning, speech, like that in general, confirms the foolishness of the so-called learned offenders who are envious of the devotees at every step. Thus, their pride of learning is diminished. Due to the absence of realization in the absolute truth, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, they belch forth mundane knowledge of sense enjoyment. This is the cause of their disease and fall down. So, what's being said here, in succinct form, that even though a devotee, a pure devotee may sometimes speak using improper grammar, improper language, to find fault in that is offensive. His speech is perfectly composed because it's coming directly from Krishna and is meant for Krishna's glorification. Because of that, Krishna accepts it with full satisfaction. If Krishna doesn't find fault, others shouldn't find fault. So, at least in this topic. This is a famous verse, at least one line of it. It's not quoted often, at least I've seen in Srila Prabhupada's books. Murko vatati vishnaya, dhiro vatati vishnave, upayas tu samam punyam bhavagrahi janardanaha. This last line is very famous. The reference isn't given, presumably from some shastra this is coming. At the time of offering obeisances to Lord Vishnu, a foolish person, murko, this word is here, murka, a foolish person chants Vishnaya Namaha. This is an improper form due to faulty grammar. And a learned person chants Vishnave Namaha. This is the proper form. Both achieve equal piety by their offering of obeisances, because the Lord Sri Janardana sees the sentiment of the living being. In other words, he sees the degree of devotion. Or, in other words, he awards the result accordingly. He does not see one's foolishness or intelligence. So, Janardana, Lord Janardana, he accepts the bhava or the sentiment of the devotee. A devotee may be doing something, he may not be so expert at it, he may not even know how to do it entirely, but Krishna sees the bhava, the sentiment or emotion, you can take it as too, of the devotee that's inherent in that. Just like we may be cooking something, so many different things, Every field of devotional service you can apply this to. We may be speaking. There may be a situation where we have to. There's nobody trained to speak. We may have to speak. We may not speak so nice. Even the language in which we're speaking, we may not know the language so well. Just like we may be speaking some foreign language which we don't have such expert knowledge of the grammar in. Or we may not be so knowledgeable of the subject matter. Nevertheless, even though there may be imperfections there, Krishna accepts the sentiment so long it is done out of pure devotion. So many different things. We may not be such an expert, we may not be so expert in dealing with people or so social, but nevertheless, Krishna is pleased by efforts to go out and meet people and speak to others about Krishna and distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. For example, one may be cooking and may not be such an expert cook, but Krishna is equally pleased by somebody who's very expert, or I can better phrase it like this, somebody who Krishna is not pleased at all by the non-offerings of Gordon Ramsay's, for example, than he is by even a neophyte cook in devotional service. There's this example, this quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, you get, that even a neophyte ringing a bell in an arti in the temple of Lord Vishnu, he's millions and millions and millions of times better than even the greatest of what is that? I'm paraphrasing it, something like this. All the philanthropers together combined, he's better than even that. So a devotee is definitely better than a non-devotee, but it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody who is expert in cooking, his service is more pleasing than a devotee who is also cooking and expert in cooking. Or rather, it's the sentiment that is involved. It's just like you see, very easy example. There's so many people expert at kirtan. They're even devotees, but they don't practice very seriously. Just a few days, I was discussing with Mitravan Prabhu. There's one mridanga player in Russia. He's a very expert mridanga player. I'll never be a mridanga player like him, even if I take birth after birth. But he's not so serious in devotional service. So one may be very expert in mridanga playing, but one has to see, are we sticking to the principles of Krishna consciousness? Are we following the principles of Krishna consciousness? One may sing very sweet kirtan, but if one identifies, just like there was one, to cite another example in Mayapur, there was one person there leading kirtan, and he told Vrindavan Prabhu in San Diego that I'm not a kirtanir, I'm a performer. And he's very showy in the way he does kirtan. So he's chanting, Hare Krishna, he's chanting Vaishnava bhajans, but his consciousness is not there. So what's the use of it? On some level, he's a devotee, Vaishnava Praya, something like this. Some semblance of Krishna consciousness is there. But, for example, somebody may just be chanting some, even out of tune, some Hare Krishna Mahar mantra, but if his consciousness is pure, and if his heart is pure and cleansed of material desires, then that's more important. And that is actually more pleasing to Krishna. Just like we hear in Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, we have the account of often Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur himself. We don't hear of him so much leading kirtan. I know specifically, I can remember at least, there's one instance recalled there that one occasion he would play kartals, he was playing them, but he was playing them out of time. Does that mean Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was displeasing to Krishna? No. There may be some discrepancy materially, but the thing is that Krishna accepts the spiritual ingredient, as we see here as being instructed here. So I'll continue reading until I get to the end of this pastime. One who finds fault with a devotee is himself at fault. For a devotee's descriptions are meant only for the pleasure of Krishna. Therefore, who will dare find fault with your devotional descriptions of Krishna's pastimes? Hearing Nimai's reply was like a shower of nectar in the body of Ishwara Puri. And this is just more pastime regarding Ishwara Puri, so I'll just continue this. He then smiled and said, "You will not be at fault, but you must tell me if there's any error in the book." Thereafter, Nimai would daily sit with Ishwara Puri for 1 or 2 hours to discuss his book. After hearing his poetry one day, the Lord smiled and said, This verb root of the sentence is incorrect. The Atmanipadi form should not be used here. After saying this, the Lord returned home. Ishwara Puri was a learned scholar in the scriptures, and he enjoyed analyzing scholastic topics. After Nimai left, Ishwara Puri considered the verb root that he had used, and came to the conclusion from many different angles. He left the verb in its Atmanipadi form, and when Nimai came the next day, he explained, that means first person, third person, we have in English, something like that. And when Nimai came the next day, he explained, I have concluded that that the verb you said yesterday should be paramasmaipadi, should remain, that you said should be paramasmaipadi, should remain Atmanipadi. So anyway, this purport is just some technical grammatical knowledge, so I'll just skip that. When the Lord heard this explanation, he was most satisfied with his servant's victory, and he did not find any further fault. The Vedas declare that the Lord by nature always expands his devotees' glories by making them victorious. In this way, Ishwara Puri passed a few months enjoying scholastic pastimes with Sri Gaurachandra. Where does it come? There's some benediction. Yeah, here. Ishwara Puri, however, would not remain in one place due to the restless nature of his ecstatic love. Thus, he went out on pilgrimage to purify the earth. Yeah, anyway, I'll read the commentary here. After purifying the town of Navadvip, Sri Ishwar Puripad went elsewhere for the service of Krishna. Such traveling to different places by the Mahabhagavats is considered restlessness by the fools, but those who have strong enthusiasm for serving Krishna are not solicitors of material objects for sense gratification like the ordinary materialistic fools. To conclude, whoever hears the auspicious topics about Ishwar Puri lives at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So just by hearing, I wanted to finish that because of this. Just by hearing about Ishwar Puri, we have a place at Lord Krishna's lotus feet. So to bring it back to this original point that the essence of devotional service isn't necessarily the external form. Neophytes are concerned more with the external form, and advanced devotees are more concerned with the essence. In general. So to bring it back to this point, many things could be said. There's Prahlad Maharaj's prayer in the 7th canto, Manye Dana Bijana Rupatapa Shutaujas Tejaf Prabhava Palaporishaburi Yogaha Nara Danayi Bhavanti Parasapum So Bhaktiyatatosha Bhagavan Gajutapaya. Prahlad Maharaj, he lists so many different opulences a person can have. Great learning, great wealth, great intelligence, beautiful form, great austerities, great tejas, great strength in that sense. Prabhava, great sort of effulgence, I guess like presence, I guess gravitas you can say in like English. Bala means like spiritual strength, not spiritual strength, but material strength rather. Buddhi yoga, buddhi, great intelligence. Yoga can be very expert in yoga. One can be advanced in all of these things, but nara denaihi bhavanti parasam pum. So it doesn't satisfy Krishna. None of these in and of themselves satisfy Krishna. One can be a very expert yogi, but that doesn't mean Krishna is pleased. One can be very learned, that doesn't mean Krishna is pleased. One can be very beautiful, that doesn't mean Krishna is pleased. Generally, beauty, among other things, is a bar for devotional service. Just as Kunti says, Janmaishvaya Shuta Shibir, Idhamana Madaf Human. That these things, generally, they're a bar for pure devotional service because they puff one up. Great learning, great beauty, great wealth. What's the last one? Janma, great birth as well. So generally these things actually disbar one for devotional service. Rather, we see bhaktiya tatosha, that Krishna is pleased simply by devotional service. Mam chayo vyabhacharina bhakti yogina sevate sagunan samatitityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalapate. That simply by devotional service is Krishna attained and nothing else. There's one other verse I'm thinking of, Gita, I can't remember it. But anyway, the point is here, and he cites the instance, the history of Gajendra. Gajendra, he didn't have anything. He wasn't very beautiful. He was an elephant, maybe to the she-elephant. Gajendra looked very beautiful. He definitely wasn't learned in the body of an elephant. He wasn't very advanced in austerities and tapasya, anything like this. But he sincerely prayed to the Lord, and he received the Lord's mercy. He satisfied the Lord in this way. Prahlad Maharaj, he prays like this. So, it's not, to just sum up this point, and it's 8:30, but the class is supposed to go into 9, because the breakfast time is like 9:03 or something like that, so I'll just go a little bit over, and then I'll open it up. So the central point is that we don't have to be materially expert to satisfy Krishna. Material expertise is not the central point of Krishna consciousness. It's something subsidiary. At the same time, there's a counterbalance to this. There's both in a common sense term and another facet. Just like, for example, one may not be a very expert cook, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're putting in somebody who's burning the chants every single day into the kitchen. And one may not be a very expert kirtan leader, but it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody singing out of tune should lead Mangalarti during the Vyas Puja festival, for example. There is still this, we're not impersonalists who try to lump everything together. There's still discriminations, but we do it with the understanding that Krishna has empowered devotees differently with different abilities, and everybody has their own ability in devotional service. Somebody may be very expert in singing, he may be completely horrible in cooking. One may be very good in cooking, he may be completely horrible in speaking. So many different things, examples could be given. You won't find somebody who can do everything perfectly. Of course, we should be able to do everything. One qualification of a devotee is that he's daksha, he's expert. both in Krishna conscious affairs, just like Manchuria, he's expert spiritual master. We hear this term expert spiritual master. Means he's expert in instructing his disciple. He's also expert in everything. Just as Srila Prabhupada, he was an expert manager, expert cook, expert guru, expert businessman, he spoke 4 languages, English, Bengali, Hindi, and Sanskrit, and translated them, translated books between them, among so many other things. He was able to cook a perfect chapati even when Harikesh recalls that the flour was no good, the stove was no good. So Srila Prabhupada is expert, a devotee is expert. Expertise means both spiritual and also material. And Srila Prabhupada would explain the word like this. He wanted his disciples to become expert. So we should also become expert. We should become competent in every area of devotional service. This is, at least in my own personal observation, it seems to be against the flow of modern society. Modern society, it seems to be everything is directed to you just knowing one thing, and that's it. And if you see how people are trained in this animal civilization, basically you go to college and then, you're given a general education, then you go to college, you become a specialist, and then you become a specialist, you study chemistry or something, then you enter into microbiology, or say you become a biologist, then you become a microbiologist, then you become even a more specialized in microbiology in a field that nobody's ever heard of and nobody cares about. So generally, it seems like most people nowadays, they specialize in one field. The society pushes them like that. And for example, many people don't know how to cook. Many people don't know how to speak. Somebody's a biologist, but they don't know the first thing about physics or what to speak of just basic things of living in the world, even how to maintain their own house. So unfortunately, modern education is like this, but we should be expert in everything that we're doing. There's a word that was formerly used, and previously there was an idea of, we hear Renaissance man. Somebody knows how to do everything. So we should be like that. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, for example, we see he wanted his disciples to become like this. He wanted his disciples at a very high. He said, a devotee, we should do everything better than the karmis. We should dress better than them. We should know more than them. We should live better than them. Everything we should do better than them. Because Krishna consciousness, it contains everything. So similarly too, Srila Prabhupada, he also pushed disciples like this, that you should become expert in whatever. So we should learn every aspect of devotional, at least some aspect of devotional service, even though we may not do it expertly. We should know we should know the prayers, we should know how to sing, we should know how to play basic instruments, we should know how to cook, we should know how to speak, we should know how to distribute books. Srila Prabhupada said, I want that all of my disciples learn this great art of distributing my books. We should know all these things in devotional service, because even if we don't have to right away, often in devotional service, the situation comes up that we're placed into a situation where suddenly we have to do these things. So right now, there may be cooks, but we may be in a situation where we have to cook for ourselves. It happens very often. And then you don't know how to cook, but you have to take Krishna Prasad, what to do? Then your health goes to hell because you can't cook properly, or etc., all these things. So all this should be passed on. There should be competencies and there's still, even though the essence is devotion, still there's scope for expertise within a field. Just like, for example, recently was the appearance, I think, or disappearance day of Narottam Das Thakur. So he inaugurated Manoharshai style of kirtan, specifically revolving around the mridanga, tals, and the beats that are there. Now, it doesn't mean everybody has to become an expert mridanga player, but that tradition should be carried on. So, means at least some people should become expert in this field. Everybody should learn how to cook, but at least some people should know how to make specialty items like samosa, rasgulla, gulab jamun, etc. Otherwise, the knowledge becomes lost. So everybody should know mridanga, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're putting focus on material expertise at all. But still, there's scope for knowing even in detail like that. Srila Prabhupada, obviously, his mood towards these things, generally, again, keeping the central point that we emphasize not the material expertise, but the devotion to Krishna. Srila Prabhupada often emphasized that sort of on-the-job training in regards to these things. In other words, he wanted his disciples to do all these things. How much can you study? Rather, he threw his disciples in the fire of just doing the act. He gave I've cited many times, he gave his practically who were just newcomer hippies the task of starting up a magazine. They had no idea how to run a magazine, anything about it, but he just threw them into the fire, and they worked something out. He requested his artists to paint these detailed descriptions from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and you can see they had some artistic training, but it wasn't like, there's a gap, as Rameshwar Prabhu points out, there's a big difference between the paintings of the 1970 Krishna book and the paintings in the 10th canto of Bhagavatam. Initially, they weren't so materially expert, but Srila Prabhupada just threw them in the field, and they became expert by just doing it. So similarly to every aspect of devotional service, we may not have gone to culinary school, but just by cooking under the guidance of somebody, we can understand. We may not have necessarily so many different things. We may not have be trained in sales techniques, but just by going out and trying to distribute books, Krishna gives the intelligence. Ultimately, all this comes from the Paramatma. Otherwise, without the mercy of Paramatma specifically, one can't learn anything. Even the karmis in one form or another, even indirectly so, are receiving the mercy of Paramatma for material benefits like that, and that way is not actually mercy. What to speak of the devotee? The devotees who are directly worshiping Krishna, who Paramatma is an expansion of, there will be reciprocation. Of course, it's not that we're trying to become good cooks in and of themselves, or it's not that we're trying to become musicians or anything like that, or whatever it may be. We're not trying to become salesmen. We're trying to please Krishna. So there is also some degree of refinement in one's service. Srila Prabhupada often, we see, this is my understanding from my own spiritual master, and there is this, you see often Srila Prabhupada, he gave the example of communicating during a fire. One can make any sort of gestures or any sort of communication to communicate the fact there's a fire going on. So in an emergency situation, Srila Prabhupada, he wanted his disciples to do like this. It means like, to give us a concrete example, the very quick translation of Chaitanya Charitamrita, the very quick publication of that book. But it doesn't necessarily mean that for ad infinitum that we have so many errors in the literatures we produce. For example, it doesn't necessarily mean that because Srila Prabhupada only sang, and it's not that he himself only sang, that he kept a simple kirtan. It's not that simple kirtan is disbarred. More complex kirtan is disbarred. Of course, these are bigger discussions, but it comes within tradition. It's just like so many things are there. We have the arts, for example. Srila Prabhupada inaugurated one style of art, practically a new style of art altogether. But we have traditional styles of art. There's nothing wrong with learning that. Not to get distracted by it, of course, but there is scope for these things. So two things are going on side by side. I'm making the point. There's material expertise. Material expertise may or may not be there. That's not what is pleasing to Krishna. We should understand that. But at the same time, if we're doing a service, we can try and do it properly, as far as possible. Say we're cooking, we can try to become the best cook as possible. Not necessarily for the sake of just becoming known as a great cook, but for pleasing Krishna with that service. It's natural. Just like we're doing any sort of service, whatever service we're in, personally, cooking is very tangible for me. So you're doing it, you're doing it anyway, you may as well become expert in it. You may as well refine that service. And it pleases Krishna, etc. like that. So both things are there. Of course, the essence of it all, just to again reiterate, is the devotion inherent. There's a fine line that can sometimes be mistaken, that one has to be an expert cook in order to do it properly. Or sometimes the misconception comes about that because I'm not expert, I won't cook. Because I'm not expert, I won't distribute books. Because I'm not expert, I won't sing. Because I'm not expert, I won't do such a thing. As a mistaken conception. Rather, Krishna is pleased just by our act, and by doing that, we can become expert if we so desire. At least we'll come to an okay level, which is what at least Srila Prabhupada wanted of us. So, I've just sort of elaborated here, principally by these verses from Chaitanya Bhagavat, and also this word Su Ukta, that Maitreya Muni, what he was speaking very pleasing words, very nicely put together language. He answered as very difficult questions he received from Vidura, And he answered them very expertly. How did he answer them expertly? By Krishna's mercy, ultimately. And even in the sense of learning new topics, learning new things, becoming expert spiritually or materially, everything depends on Krishna's mercy. As I've reiterated before, just as Srila Prabhupada is praying, Shukadeva Goswami prays, and many others pray, ultimately everything comes through Krishna's mercy. Even for the karmis, whatever benefits they reap, it's Krishna's mercy upon them. That's how Krishna is reciprocating with them. That's how Paramatma is reciprocating with them, because they want to be on that level. So if we want to be Krishna conscious, if we want to serve Krishna nicely, Krishna will empower us to do so. That's not the essence, of course, but we can, and it's not outside the scope of pure devotional service. To say, for example, if one wants to become a better book distributor, for the sake of Krishna, it's not disbarred. It's not necessarily, it's not a contaminating desire. If we align those desires with the desires of the Guru specifically, Srila Prabhupada wanted his books distributed. So, pure devotional service also means desiring to increase that book distribution more and more and more. For example, Srila Prabhupada wanted so many different things. So if we align our desires with those desires and sincerely strive for them, looking for Krishna's mercy, we can attain success. So, yeah. There's other points in the purport. I didn't cover them so much. One I'll just mention in passing here. By clear understanding, the disturbed mind, this I've spoken about before, approaching the spiritual master, he gives clearance to the disturbed condition of the mind. And one thing as well, the first sentence I didn't cover, is that the science is so subtle that even Vidura has to approach Maitreya to understand. So at every point of our Krishna consciousness, we require guidance, even if it's among God brothers. We can see very practically in many instances, even among Srila Prabhupada's disciples, even though Srila Prabhupada is seemingly absent physically, of course his books are there, but the books can't answer everything. In terms of everything is in his books, but still, nevertheless, there's some things you don't read in Bhagavatam. For example, there's many bewildering conditions that can arise in this world, very practical things dealing with worldly matters. Sometimes we must consult devotees. And you see, senior devotees, they'll consult among themselves, they'll consult their own senior godbrothers, etc. like this. So at every stage in our devotional service, we also require such guidance. So this is just a side point. So I can end my class here. There's about 15 minutes left. We have to go to 9 or so I can end it there and take anything anybody has at this point.
So, one speech that Prabhupada often criticized was Vivekananda's speech in Chicago.
That's a good point,
He spoke something and came back with woman and said, I converted everybody in the West, like that, and that was Prabhupada. Regarding about education, about practical things, I remember when I came out of school, I had to start work. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to open a bank account. I didn't even know what was a bank account, what was like, what do you do, what are different types of cards that you have, how are you supposed to file your taxes or nothing. And it's actually really dumb. I mean, anyways, it's shocking how many people don't know how to write a simple check. And the check doesn't go through. It's anyways. But you know what's also very interesting, I was thinking about this, why do they not teach you this stuff? In one sense, because most people are not very intelligent, it's very easy to exploit them because they have to do these things. Everybody has to do these things. In the modern world, everybody needs a bank account. If you want to live outside work or whatever, you need a bank account. You don't know anything. You don't know what it is. It's so easy to get duped with all kinds of crazy fines or penalties or charges that you don't know what you're paying for. And the modern education system doesn't educate you on any of these things. Nor do they educate you about their so-called education about what is good for you to eat and what is nutritious is also completely bogus. I was also recently, unfortunately, in some school, and they had this nutrition chart. And you look at that nutrition chart, it's so bogus. They say all these things are very healthy for you, and there's all not healthy at all. Anyways, I had a question. how does one answer the argument that someone doesn't want to do a service because they say, well, I don't know how to do it nicely, therefore it's going to be displeasing to Krishna, so I don't want to do it?
Not necessarily. So, I mean, just like, there's some quote by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I'm just forgetting it. It's something like through imperfection, perfection comes about. I'm very badly paraphrasing that. There's a quote from Sajjana Toshini. But something may be impure in the beginning, but later perfection may come about. I mean, it's like that with anything. If you want to play mridanga, for example, very concrete, you have to accept the fact that you are going to screw up in playing the mridanga many times, and by screwing up many times, you become expert. It's the case with anything. It's just like, you're doing. In school, we've all been to school here. We've all received some sort of education. You make so many mistakes. The teacher teaches something, and then he gives you homework to do. You've already learned how to do it. You paid attention in class. You completely forget. You don't know how to do it. You screw up in so many times. But by repetition of that, you become knowledgeable in how to do it. It's not even something spiritual. It's something mundane. This is the case with learning anything. By repeated failure, success comes about with anything, practically. But and also Guru Maharaj has a series of lectures on this, how to succeed in anything, where he brings up these points that, one thing is enthusiasm and not being discouraged. So if you want to become good at it, if the argument is because I'm bad at doing something, I don't want to do it because it will be displeasing, we'll become good at it. And even if you think mistakenly that only if it's done good will please Krishna, well, you should become good and please Krishna if you're going to maintain that conception. So either way, there's no point to remain incompetent in whatever activity it may be. Maybe some things it could be, just like some people. There are some people who are tone deaf, okay? Maybe they can't be. Some people, just according to the nature, they can't be so expert at some things. But generally, when we speak of tone deaf, actually very few people are tone deaf. Most people can be trained. They can be given some basic training, even in just understanding. Same thing with anything. One may not be a very expert cook. He may never come up to that standard, but we need cooks. Even to cook for yourself is necessary. It's important. One may not be a very expert singer, but we're in a devotional service. Kirtan is our life, Srila Prabhupada writes. So, we should sing for the pleasure of the Lord. So, yeah, that's how I would respond to it. It's not necessarily just as, for example, Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatams, if you read those first cantos, they're very imperfectly composed. Sometimes you can't understand what's being said, actually. Even the Sanskrit, sometimes the Sanskrit, it's often, actually, it's written as how a Bengali would pronounce it. So, Savai Pumsam, it would be written as Sabai Pumsam. So even, it's fine, there's no fault in it, but definitely imperfectly composed, but Krishna was pleased by it. He was completely pleased by it, and it had an effect, actually. It had and later it was refined. Later Srila Prabhupada had it refined. So we can't expect immediate results, and we shouldn't become discouraged, even if there's some sort of material and expertise in the beginning, and whatever it may be, So,
some practical advice that I've kind of had over the years also is that it's really important in our early days of Krishna consciousness to really try to learn all these things, because as you progress, you get given responsibilities, and then you won't have time to do them. So one thing that I learned was you find someone who's really the best at doing what you want to do or what you want to learn, and you try to be half as good as them. And just by learning from them, because they'll show you the way they can cook, or the way they do kirtan, or the way they distribute books, or the way they manage, or the way they do all of these things. Because every devotee has expert field in something. So it's that principle of guru. It's you kind of carry that out. That you see them as your guru in that field, and you go and you do it, and you'll see that if you become half as good as them, it's really good. So then like you said, you get so many years to kind of keep going at that, and you learn so many things. And then when we go, for example, we're at UGA, and even cooking here, it's better than any Indian restaurant that you can go to. Whatever.
It's a fact.
even if the cooks are very new, whatever they cook is much better than anything you'll find at a restaurant. Even what to speak of some of the expert cooks that are there. And then even the kirtan, most of the musicians can't keep up with us when we do the kirtans. the philosophy. They can't even touch what we are speaking. Even a new bhakta that's been reading the Bhagavad Gita, that's read the Bhagavad Gita once, can start start to argue with so many people on the platform of studying philosophy at the university for 3-4 years. So it's really amazing actually, and people are really impressed. You're right, like people are just impressed and like, whoa, what is this? And like one of the guys was telling me, man, like everything about this is like amazing, like the food, the association, the philosophy, the music, everything you guys are doing. It's like I can't see how you're able to do all this. And like you were saying, like students are in school for like 8, 9, 10 years
studying the one
yeah,
topic.
what is Ankush
single
doing
topic
this,
they study.
Bioinformatics, but now he's learning how a strawberry, what is that? The common ancestry between the common ancestry between strawberry and a grape. And that's how it is, yeah. Yeah. So Gears is probably give me some. Yeah. But so and then we asked him, so what have you learned practically? Yeah. So what have you learned practically? He's like, I learned beekeeping. I said, bro, like you can learn that from Jananda's mom in a day. It's like she's not no expert bioinformatics. And then what was the other thing he said he learned?
You get into debt for that.
Yeah, he get into debt for that. No, well, he gets paid a little bit. What did he say? He learned one more thing. It was like really useless. Well, he studies insects, the evolution of insects.
How their legs grew longer.
Yeah, how their legs grow longer over time. That's what you study in PhD. Dude, so much anxiety. 16 hours a day in that lab, that's what you do. It's a useless waste of time. But how Krishna consciousness, you learn so much in so little. And it's so much better than school, God.
Yeah. School is horrible. There's so many practical things in people's lives that people don't know how to do. But most people don't know how to wash their clothes. As a fact, they just throw it in a machine and they have no idea. Without the machine doesn't work. They don't know how to wash it. They don't know how to cook for themselves. They don't know how to do anything because the education is horrible. You have something?
And that's basically, varnashram dharma, where the children are taught practical skills according to their nature. And nowadays they'll look at that as like, child labor. But it's another nonsense, the child labor. And then in the name of child labor, they send these kids to 18 years of completely useless education.
Yeah.
Where they don't learn anything useful in life. And waste, what they learn very well is how to waste their human form of life. This is, and whereas you can see now, even in the temple, we have this, we're trying to learn these different things, different skills that are helpful in life. But imagine how useful it could have been if we learned so many of these kind of useful things from childhood. And that's the kind of education system, along with a proper sense of devotion, respect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, respect of the Guru, of seniors in society, and things like that. These are the values that we need to have. So you have value education, and then you have Varna education, which is meant for occupational duty. And then one's whole human form of life is made useful, where one can maintain. Now modern education, neither do you learn values, neither do you learn proper occupation. You don't know how to maintain yourself, nor do you have the proper values that qualify one to be a human being. You live like an animal, but the animal's expert in maintaining itself, and you're not expert in doing that also. So this modern education, and anyways, it's bewildering how much even we psychologically sometimes, when presented with Varna education or something like that, I personally, myself, when I saw this, I was like, wow, this is all these kids are learning. Oh my gosh, they're not going to school, and like, or whatever, that this psychological manipulation that's there in our heads after going through this education system is ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, there's many points I could say. I just made it a little short for others, but I was quite, when I saw Gurukulas in India, I was thinking like that, like, these are like super soldiers from practically they're like 5 years old or so. They know so many things. Everything. They're more competent materially than I'll ever be in this whole lifetime. There's I know that they know Sanskrit fluently. It's like they can read it just as we can read English. They know all the instruments. They know singing. They've been obviously worshiping Krishna throughout their lives. They know cooking. They know deity worship. They might not do it, but at least they've seen. So many things that practically every aspect of devotional service they know. And it's like, okay, well, there's no fault. We may be learning these things later in life. We shouldn't become depressed or anything like that. Brahmacharya ashram specifically is ashram of learning. We can take advantage. Brahmacharya ashram as well, it offers a very nice opportunity. Okay, we should have learned these things maybe 20 years ago. Nevertheless, it's not too late. Srila Prabhupada, he would often say, I should have come to the West decades ago. Nevertheless, he came, and still results were there. So, okay, we're learning late, maybe there. Nevertheless, we should try to learn. It's not that we remain ignorant like that. But specifically, I'm just hitting on this point, Brahmacharya ashram as well. It gives a very good scope for learning. As an ashram of learning, spiritual topics specifically, but also many other things can be learned. Just like Guru Maharaj writes in Brahmacharya and Krishna consciousness, things like accounting, even vehicle maintenance, which most people have no idea about. Cooking, obviously, how to play instruments, how to play the mridanga, how to play kartals, and not just limited to the men. He writes that women can also learn these things. Etc. like that. So we should learn, we should utilize it in Krishna. There's so many things to learn in Krishna consciousness. As there's 64 arts, there's so many things to learn and imbibe in Krishna consciousness. And using it for the service of Krishna. So yeah, we should. Anything else? We have, it's already 9 o'clock. Okay. Do the women have anything? Yes, there's a question over there.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Mm-hmm. Hare Krishna. Prabhu, what does Puri name indicates or its meaning? Like the common name is here, Ishwar Puri, Ishwar Puri, then Madhavendra Puri, Ramchandra Puri. My understanding is Puri means Shri Kshetra Dham, Holy Dham. Mm-hmm. So, is it because of they are staying in Dham? So the name is Puri.
Etymological meaning, as far as I know, Puri is used generally for, just like with Jagannath Puri, Puri generally refers to a sort of like city, something like that. Perhaps it's referring to a dham, presumably Jagannath Puri. I'm not quite sure specifically, I can't say definitely. It's principally just used as a surname as well, just like we have Tirtha is also coming there, and in our parampara as well. We have Lakshmipati Tirtha, Vyasa Tirtha, so many Tirthas are there in the Sampradaya. So it's a surname, not exactly surname, it's a title of their sannyas. It's indicative of the Sampradaya in which they've taken sannyas. And that name is passed down through the line. Just like also Bharati, we have Keshava Bharati, that same name. Bharati, what does it literally mean? I don't speak those languages, but presumably it means like Bharati. Bharata means India. Bharati, presumably, what's that? Or it could be one of the part. I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but the literal meaning, if you translate it literally, it may not make so much sense. But for the principal thing I understand from it is it's indicative of the sannyas sampradaya that they're coming in. There's so many different things. Just like Chaitanya is also. That's a brahmachari name, but specifically within these sampradayas, we have names. For example, a brahmachari name, sannyasi names. There's a purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Srila Prabhupada translates. He lists all these names of the sannyasis, etc. like this. So my limited extent of knowledge is just etymologically, it may not literally mean so much. It's more just a name, something like that. So. Sorry, it may not be so satisfying, but I don't have so much knowledge of that. So it's just like Tirtha. Tirtha can mean any Tirtha. It's a very generic thing. Puri can mean any Puri, any city. Tirtha can mean literally any Tirtha. But it's just a name that's assigned just like that. That's my understanding. So, okay, it's time to break fast. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Ishwar Puri ki jai.